What's up, everyone? Welcome back for another very special edition of Collider Dailies. You not only have me and Steve today, but you have a guest, a very cool guest. We have Grant Singer, the director behind Reptile, one of Netflix's hottest movies right now. My God, first feature and big winner on Netflix. Congratulations, Grant.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
So, Steve, I believe you're kicking us off here,
Yeah, I was
right?
going to say I'm going to start with the first question. So, for people who are not who do not have the number one movie on Netflix, I'm just curious, what is it like actually having the number one film for 3 consecutive weeks?
It's surreal. I mean, I think actually it wasn't until the weekend the movie was released did I really have even like a remote grasp on like the global impact of Netflix. I was getting messages in languages I don't even understand about like how much the movie moved them and how much people connected with it. And that to me was like something that I didn't fully understand until like the movie had been out. Just like their reach. Like this is like not just like a movie that has like, oh, the movie's in theaters around the world. I mean, it's like anyone who has a TV, not anybody, but a lot of people with TV have a Netflix account. So just the sheer scope and volume of the amount of people that it reaches is pretty surreal. So I think surreal is the right answer.
Sounds like an appropriate word to use. I'll just preface this question by telling everybody this is going to be a spoiler-free interview until we say otherwise. So you are in a safe place until we give you a very, very clear warning if you have not watched Reptile. But I'm going to risk it with this question, Grant. So given the widespread reaction to this movie, is there anything in particular that surprised you about an audience's response to the film? Like unexpected interpretations or little details that people picked up on that you didn't think they would?
So someone had sent me these like Twitter threads of like people reading into every little thing. And some of them I was like, some of them actually was like, okay, they're actually catching on to things that we were doing with the film, which I was like really pleased with. I'm like, oh, these people are very thoughtful and considerate in their sort of, experience of the movie. And then other things I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. So there's a lot of like almost new theories or new sort of people sort of putting things together in their own head. That to me, again, it's not that I didn't think about it, like how people were going to sort of respond to the movie and interact with the movie. But again, it's like there's always surprises as to sort of what people latch on to, certain things in the script or certain things in the filmmaking, whether it be mirroring. I'm not talking about the actual use of mirrors in the movie, but like the mirroring sort of how things are paralleled throughout the movie. But I think just the manner in which people really sort of got into the intricacies of all the little details throughout the movie that I think really surprised me.
There's one little rabbit hole that I went down, and I'm going to save it for the spoiler section, but I'm very curious if this is like a legitimate thing that you thought to do.
Okay,
so I'll
cool.
just tease that for later.
Okay, excited.
I'm so curious. It's hard to sometimes get meetings in Hollywood, but once your movie comes out and people like it and it's doing well, that can change. So what have the last few weeks been like for you in terms of like people wanting to meet you or discuss what you want to do next? Because the movie is, you know what I mean.
Yeah. The people who've seen the movie and who've liked it, I've had some meetings with, and, mostly we talk about the movie, sort of what it was like to make it. I think there's always, once you make your first film, people are just curious about like, not just the movie that you made, but like, what do you want to do in the future? It's like, do you want to make something similar? Are you looking to make a similar sort of crime thriller? Are you looking to do something different? Like what kind of projects, whether they have something or do I have an original idea that I would and that I would want to go out with, things like that. And also it's just trying to, I think most of the meetings are like just getting to know me or like, like getting a sense of like, okay, who's the person that directed the movie? And yeah, I think certainly once you make a movie, there's more opportunities to like just broaden your horizon in terms of the amount of, whether it be studios or producers or actors. I've actually had that was also surprising, actors reaching out to me, how much they enjoyed the movie and wanted to sort of talk. And I was with an actor yesterday who I really loved. And, the actor meetings are really special because at the end of the day, I think the actor-director relationship is probably the most sacred relationship when making a movie. At the end of the day, you can be super talented as a director, but if what you're seeing on screen isn't, moving or emotional or powerful, then, it's hard to make something compelling. So I love meeting actors and hearing what they're interested in doing and what their thoughts of the movie were. So So certainly the actor meetings are very cool too.
I have to do
I love that mentality about working with
I have
actors.
to do a follow up. So, what have you been telling people in these meetings in terms of what you want to do next?
Well, it depends on the meeting, and I'm not cagey. I'm not like concealing anything. I'm writing something that I would like to do, but I'm also open to doing other things. But like, I don't want to like be super prescriptive and say this is what my next movie is or this is what I want to do. I want to be open and like here, every meeting is different and a lot of times people can sort of surprise you with a story. At the end of the day, like sometimes you might hear a story, like something might happen to you. Like you might hear a story like, wow, I didn't think that would be something that I would be, want to pursue or a movie that you would want to see, for example. But then all of a sudden it kind of like strikes you and you can't stop thinking about it. So I just want to be open to sort of, what might come my way. And yeah, I think that's really the right answer.
So we jumped like way ahead without talking about your background, given that this is your first feature. A lot of our viewers are likely first going to get to know you via this interview, via this movie. So first, I wanted to ask you, I guess kind of to pick your favorite child of all your music videos, do you have an absolute favorite? Like if everyone left this interview and watched just one, which one would you want them to watch?
That's a great question. I would say The Weeknd, Call Out My Name. It's the last video I did for Abel, and at that time I'd already made 5 or 6, maybe 7 music videos for him. I can't remember, but I felt like we were really, vibing well creatively, and it felt like I felt free, he felt free as an artist. Our collaboration was great. I like the way it looks visually. I like the compositions. I like how presentational it is. It's sort of like I'm doing sort of like kind of Mark Romantic photographic things in there. I love the color palette. I just enjoyed also the experience of making that project. Like it was visually aggressive. It was just a fun thing. It was just a good time making that video.
It's a solid choice. I've grown a little obsessed with Red Hearse over the years, so I feel like I would veer towards that one and Half Love. You got to watch both.
I like those. I love Jack Antonoff. Shout out Jack, who is one of the guys in Red Hearse, and I love making those videos. That was like I met Jack through working with Ella, who goes by Lord, when I was doing Greenlight, the first video I did for her. And we became pals. And so he hit me up and said, hey, I got this side project. You want to make a video? And we've stayed close ever since. I loved making those videos too. Those were good. Those were fun ones.
Work with some really cool people. All right, Steve, you want to take us into Reptile?
Sure, what the hell. I heard I might have some questions. So I think that for a lot of people, so this is your feature debut. And how much did you debate what you wanted to do with your feature and why was Reptile the thing that ended up getting made?
I knew I wanted to make a crime thriller. I think like a sort of contemporary noir. These are movies, in the similar vein that have stuck with me the most throughout my life as a student of film and loving movies. And I felt like with your first, movie, you're not just trying to make a good movie, but you're also trying to like convey who you are as a filmmaker. And there was this sort of unnerving, suspenseful tone with a little bit of warmth and playful and levity. Just felt like the right kind of movie to make as my first film. And then what was the second part of the question?
I don't remember. I think it was basically
Okay, me neither. But it felt like this just felt like the right movie to make. I mean I really approach directing and even just like what we were talking about, going back to your earlier question, which is like, what do you want to do next, right? Like everything is intuitive. I don't want to be super intellectual or cerebral in terms of like how I want, like what I want to do. This is what I want to do. It's like I want to be very open and liberated. I think artistically, as a person who's growing as a filmmaker and wanting to do new things, being open, right, is also a really important part of that same facet of being creative. It's not, for me, being really hard in terms of that kind of mentality is not something that I think yields the right kind of results for me personally,
Totally makes sense. Going back to the music videos a little bit, because you've had so much success in that realm, is it easy to convince the necessary parties to give you the okay to direct a feature? Or is it a situation where you have to convince them like, I'm good at this, but I can do this as well?
I actually think, unfortunately, you have to start from scratch. Like certainly you get your foot in the door. Like, okay, listen, I can direct, meaning like I can direct something visual. But I think unfortunately there's a negative perception with music video directors. Like, oh, you're just like a music video director. Like it's not serious. It's for some reason, again, I come from the generation of like looking up to people like Fincher and Spike Jonze and Mark Romanek and Michelle Gondry and, you know, Chris Cunningham and Hype Williams and all those guys. So I knew at a young age, like, well, there was a path forward, even subconsciously. Like if I were to make music videos, and maybe one day might make the opportunity to like prove myself as a director of music videos, and then maybe I can get with the right script or whatever, can make a movie. When you go in that room, like these pitch meetings, they're really just kind of looking again, I can't speak for everyone, but in my instance, it's like, okay, does this guy have a vision? Is he going to be good with actors, right? As a producer or a studio, it's like, you might be the most talented director ever visually, but if you can't like articulate your vision and also seem collaborative, there's all these like different personality traits. Again, you would have to ask a producer what those specifically are, but I'm just assuming it's the idea when you're a director, you have to like, you're really the ultimate communicator on set. You have to communicate to hundreds of people what your vision is, work very economically and quickly, and not be overly precious about certain things, you know, especially in your first film, because you don't have that, like, you don't have as much leverage. So in that pitch process, they're really as much, it's less almost about like, what is the movie you want to make, and more like, who are you? Is this someone that like, I want to invest X amount of dollars into this project? Because a lot of projects succeed, but a lot of projects don't. So and I can also speak on behalf of Benicio. On that first meeting I had with him, he had so many questions, right? Like about the movie, like so many questions about what my vision was, but I could tell minute 45, it was less about the movie and more about him trying to figure me out. Right? Because as an actor, you're really, I don't care how talented you are, if you're in the hands of a director, right? And like they could mismanage your performance. They might have a very different vision of what the movie is versus what your vision is. So he was very much trying, again, I can't speak for him, but my perception of that meeting was he was trying to get a sense of who I was as a person. And as a director, what kind of director I would be on your first movie, right? So it's a lot of like, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of like them sensing out, okay, this guy, Grant, he's made a lot of music videos. We know he's got sort of a visual thing, but how is that going to translate into a narrative thing? And again, I don't care how persuasive you are in the room. Once you're on set, that's really the ultimate test, you know?
Speaking of Benicio, he co-wrote this screenplay, which is the first time he's gotten a credit like that. So what surprised you about working with him as a screenwriter? What did he bring to the table?
You know, Benicio is so thoughtful about every little detail, right? As an actor, I think, again, I don't approach film as an actor. I approach it, you know, from more objective perspective, being behind the camera. But as an actor, you have to inhabit these characters. And he's had decades and decades of doing incredible movies, inhabiting brilliant, very varied characters. So he thinks about stories from within, right? From within a story, from within a character, really from a very complex, three-dimensional way, in a holistic way. So he brings a lot of consideration, passion, and thoughtfulness into every little beat, right, of the movie, not just from his character, but also through the storytelling. And it was a very rewarding process. The whole experience was pretty amazing. And also just having the time, you know, I can't even imagine going to set, right, and your first movie, and you don't have much time ahead of time with your lead actor, right? Like you've had a couple meetings, whatever, but that would be a very different experience than the one I had, which like by the time we were rolling, we had just endless amount of conversations about the movie. We really got to know each other as people. So there was a comfort level that was, I think, very beneficial for the final product, which was the familiarity of not feeling insecure in any way, you know, in your role. Like it was, I felt very comfortable with him, communicating with him, and I think vice versa for him, you know?
And then you obviously cast Alicia just so you could make an excess baggage reunion, right?
Well, it's funny. It was his suggestion to cast Alicia when we were talking about that during that casting process. He brought her name up, and I thought that was so inspired. And again, he had known her for so long, and having worked with her, he just clearly knew that she could inhabit the role in a beautiful way. And I loved that. I thought it was such an inspired idea. And then once we talked to her over Zoom, it was just kind of, it felt inevitable. It felt like just a totally right decision. I'm so glad it worked out.
She's crushing it lately. I feel like in recent years, but this year in particular, seeing this and Perpetrator back to back, I'm like, you are the coolest. Like, keep swinging big and doing bold projects, because I'm very much here for it.
I am too. And it's funny, like a week or two after the movie came out, we saw on IMDb her star meter was #1. And I was like, it made me feel so good. It made me feel so good because like we are bringing Alicia back, and it was amazing. Obviously, I can't take sole credit for that, but I just love that she's doing so well, and she's just the best person. I can hope to continue to work with her, and for many years to come.
It makes me happy. So one thing I love doing is highlighting the different variety of approaches to acting that there are out there. So I'll loop Justin in for this too. Can you maybe specify something unique about the way that Justin, Alicia, and Benicio all approach their work, where it calls for something different from you as their actor's director?
It's a great question, by the way. Every actor in the movie approached their process completely differently. I actually don't think there was a single actor where I could be like, oh yeah, those two people are the same, or those two people kind of communicated with me about their process, their roles, and what their character is doing the same. It was every character, every actor was a very unique relationship that I had with them. Justin is one of the greatest and biggest pop stars in the world, right? He's an amazing musician, but he's also a phenomenal actor. And he really thinks about his character in the story in such deep ways. I can remember like leaving set and like being on the phone with him for like an hour and a half about like whatever we're gonna do the next day and different ideas. And again, super thoughtful, but in different ways than Benicio, right? Like they both, communicating with them is also very different. Like you talk about things in a different way. Same thing with Alicia, same thing with Michael Pitt, right? Like Michael Pitt is very immersive as an actor, and speaking to him, even like getting him, or getting ready to do a scene, I would communicate with him very differently than I would with Justin. Also, a lot of times Justin and Michael had scenes together, which was so amazing for me because I would direct them very differently, right? Like I would go speak to Justin about what we were going to do in a certain scene. And then I'd go to Michael, where he was standing outside smoking or whatever, and I would talk to Michael, and I'd be like, "Listen, Michael, so I want to do this," and I would like completely change the way that I would talk about the scene, and then it was great because then you have these two very opposing, sort of diabolically different characters, right? Intrinsically, completely just alien one another, and I think that's what makes those scenes so alive and have such a sort of a vitality to them, is because you're seeing completely two different types of people from two different walks of life, two different approaches to acting sort of converge, and that to me was really exciting.
That's a great answer.
One of the things, listen, I touched on this with you previously, but I really enjoyed the way you moved the camera, especially in the first act. And because I rewatched the film last night, and there's like really methodical choice, like real choices in the first act with how the camera's going, especially just things that I noticed, and how you do your edits, which is very abrupt. And so I'm curious, can you talk about being the moving camera on a tight schedule, where I also know you didn't have a lot of time in prep before you stepped on set, and the way you chose to edit with those sharp edits?
So sharp being the operative word, and I appreciate you seeing that, because that's something we were going. I wanted something that would like slice, right? I wanted something caustic, abrasive. I want like that really hard, sharp, razor sharp construction to the movie. I love like very classical camera moves. Like I'm very traditional. Like I love, like when I watch older movies, I just love the way they move the camera. Like it's like very considered, and it's very like, I don't know, to me, it's like a love letter to like all these movies from the past. But I wanted that sort of, that very sort of formal, like I think we were talking about the first act. The first act is much more presentational. And then as the film progresses, the film gets within Benicio's character and it becomes much more immersive. We use longer lenses, more zooms. It's a little bit, I don't say more loose, but it's certainly more like within, right? It's within a scene as opposed to objective, right? Like as the movie begins, we're much more outside of the world and we're sort of looking at it sort of voyeuristically, and then it just sort of completely changes once like there's actually a shot halfway through the film spoiler, where something happens with Benicio's character and he's being taken away in a police car, and there's a shot of the farm field and there's a fence in between, in the center of the frame, and it's before we fade to black, we see the car very far away from the camera just drive from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, and we fade to black. And you see like these cows on either side, but it's really at that point in the movie, we're going from the first half of the film to the second half, and the film is completely changing, right? And at that point, really the way that I shot the movie is slightly different. Right? Like I'm not going to go into like how I shot the movie, but like we do, that's sort of the turning point, right? In terms of like the style that you're talking about. And it's funny because I watched The Killer last night, and Fincher does these amazing sonic transitions and cut points that I'm very fond of. And certainly like there are similar sort of sharp edges to the way Reptile has been edited and constructed. And that's just a taste thing. You know, it just comes down to like how you want to. That was something that was even years ago before we shot the movie. I knew that was going to be in the construction of the film. Just something that, again, like you were saying, why did you want to make this movie? It was like, well, I wanted to also employ those techniques cinematically because I just love them. You know.
So before we veer into spoiler territory, I wanted to ask you one broader question, because we always love highlighting as many people's work in this industry as possible. Can you name, other than The Killer, a recent movie you saw that inspired you and maybe even, I don't know, gives you hope for the future of this craft and industry?
That's a great question. A movie before I made Reptile or within the last couple? It could be any time. Like
I'll take either. I'll even take both if you have two examples.
Yeah, I have two examples. Let me just think about this for a second. Okay. I rewatched Shoe Shine by DeSica. It's an older movie, obviously. He made it just before Bicycle Thieves, but that sort of sincere filmmaking that just about that deals with the human condition and the corruption of youth and innocence, and it deals with things that are very primal. And it comes from such a deep place in the soul. And the storytelling is just so brilliant. The performances are like just unbelievable. It just took my breath away. Another movie, a more recent movie that I saw and loved. I rewatched Swimming Pool by Francois Ozon, which was a movie that I loved in 2004. Is it 2004 when it? No, 2001 when it came out. And I remember I'm rewatching movies kind of like that I love from the past, and I loved that movie. And Charlotte Rampling is just incredible, and I love that the atmosphere and how that movie really takes its time and doesn't. And again, it's so great. I was about to say the F word. I'm not going to. But one movie I saw last night, and I have to just shout out, it was so inspiring, was The Killer. And again, no spoilers. That movie's not out yet. But I thought you were about to ask me, is there a performance? When you said, do you want to give a shout out to someone? I thought you were going to say, was there a performance? And actually, there's a performance of an actor in that movie that is so great. I mean, all the performances, but I believe her character name was Dolores. And I wasn't familiar with her as an actor before last night, before the movie, and she's so good in the movie. All the performances in the movie were great. But shout out The Killer. That movie's sensational, and I just can't wait for that movie to come out.
Now I want to look up who plays Dolores.
I have a question. You're telling me that David Fincher manages to get great performances out of people? That is shocking.
Well, you know what's so funny is that I think whenever I read about Fincher, obviously I have my own relationship to his work because I've been influenced by it for so long. But people always talk about like the sort of technical magnificence of his movies, which are undeniable, right? He's just a master technically in many ways. I mean, in every way. But people don't talk about his performances. In my opinion, like when I read about his work, people talk about like the imagery and all the sort of like directorial things that are going on in his movies and what he's able to do. But I really feel in all of his movies, specifically when I watched The Killer last night, oh my God, it might be my favorite Michael Fassbender performance ever that I've seen him in. And it's so good. And the performances are just like sensational. And so I don't want to, no spoilers, but like I have a lot to say about that movie because it really moved me. And I had like a grin, a smile on my face the whole time. And it was just, it's such a pleasure to watch his work. And I'm so excited that it's a movie that's going to be on Netflix. So many people are going to see it. And I think it's going to be a huge hit.
Carrie O'Malley plays Dolores, just so
She's
everyone can
amazing.
jot her name down, and I'm going to be looking out for her when I see that movie now.
She's amazing. Shout out Carrie.
I'm also gonna
All right.
listen. I've been pitching the government for something, and maybe you guys can help me make it happen. But I have always believed, especially the last few years, that anytime David Fincher has a new movie coming out, it should be a national holiday.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm on that level because
I agree.
listen, it national holiday. I mean, I'm willing to do world holiday, but for now, I'll just take the United States.
Well, can we at least get him an Oscar? Because last night, the screening, they announced all of his collaborators, and it was like Oscar winner, Oscar winner, Oscar winner, and then greatest director on the planet, David Fincher. That's what Elvis Mitchell said. And we all clap, and I'm thinking, how does he not have an Oscar? How does he not have an Oscar by now? It doesn't make
Well,
sense.
I'll say that he has not made that Oscar movie. He's not leaned into making a film that is an Oscar type player. The fact of the matter is, if he wanted it, I believe he's so ridiculously talented that he just hasn't played the game, and he hasn't made a film that's like an Oscar film. Perry, I don't know if you want to chime in.
I felt
I
Mank.
feel like in hindsight, we could say that about a bunch of his films that they were deserving.
With Mank, it was something that maybe could have been something. But the other thing is, like, look, I mean, there's incredible movies this year, and only one is going to win Best Picture. It's going to probably be Oppenheimer. Nolan is going to. Remember, Nolan hasn't gotten anything either. So
Right.
and this is
Wait, Nolan's never won Best- What was 2007 Zodiac? Listen, I know that was a crowded year with There Will Be Blood, No Country, Michael Clayton, I believe, was 2007. You had 2007 was also that Noah Baumbach movie, Margot at the Wedding, right? It was like a very
I can't believe I'm not going to remember the
what-
name.
2007.
Yeah.
2007 was a huge year for movies. What year was The Departed? Well, no, that was earlier. That was 2004.
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't know. The point is, I understand. I mean, Zodiac to me is certainly worthy of that. But listen, we don't have to. This isn't the how come David Fincher hasn't won an Oscar episode, although it should be. But I think I certainly felt like Mank was deserving of that, and I don't remember what won that year, who won Best Director. But when I watched Mank the first time, it was like. I couldn't even. It was like a marvel, like an actual unbelievable marvel, cinematic marvel. It was like just
Listen, again, national
Chloe Zhao
holiday,
won that year.
Oh,
Don't admit.
okay.
national holiday when Fincher has a new movie coming out.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, done deal. We're going to make it happen. We manifested it. And now it is time to talk about Reptile Spoilers. So if you have not watched the movie, now is the time to push pause on the video. You go watch it on Netflix, then you come back and push play, and the video begins right here. It's that easy. It's that great. All right, first question that I wanted to throw in this section so you can answer it freely. What is the biggest difference between draft one of this screenplay and what we now see in the final film?
The first draft was much more ambiguous, much more like leaving things to the audience's imagination. It was more Lost Highway in tone, like really unnerving and mysterious and sort of out of reach. And then the movie that you saw is, I think there are a lot of things that are similar, but there's much more clarity in terms of certain things, specifically in the last act. And, earlier drafts had a different ending. The biggest thing was that it had a much more ambiguous ending where you sort of don't know what happens, and it's more internal and perhaps a little bit more cerebral, and left to the viewer's imagination. And I think that, so that's the biggest difference, I'd say.
I want to follow up on that. Was it Benicio's notes or a producer note that caused that change to get to where audiences see what they see? Or did you realize along the way, maybe this is too, this might be too much for like a mainstream audience?
I think, certainly like once, you develop a script with the producers, right, who have like come to the movie from a different perspective, right? Both loving the vision, but also like wanting to make it work for a large audience. And certainly once Netflix comes on board, it's like, wow, we as the filmmakers are much more conscious of like, this is going to play for a lot of people, right? It's like, I compare it to like, okay, you watch, like imagine the Velvet Underground, playing a small club in like the late 60s, right? In downtown New York. Their performance is going to change. Same songs, but when they play the Hollywood Bowl, because you're gonna play the same music, but you're gonna modulate how you perform the song slightly different depending on the size of the audience, right? And I think that there was certainly some calibration there, where we started to realize, just like the format, right? Like how this was gonna play for different people, but I think it was also just like what we felt was right, like where we want the story to go. When you work on a movie, again, I can't speak for everyone, but for just speaking from me, it's a process where like your understanding of the material changes the more you look at it and the more you think about it, right? And you start to think about, this isn't a cerebral work, it's not a literary work, it's a work that an audience is going to be sitting with these characters and they're going to get invested in them, and you're going to want to know certain things, or else you're going to feel cheated, right? Or like cheated not just by the characters but by the filmmaker, by the movie, and you want to just be conscious of how you're of the audience's perception. It's the same thing with like, why do I do certain edits? It's because I want it to strike, and I want that feeling for the viewer, right? It's not just because I like it as the in the editing room, it's because I understand that it's going to have a certain effect for the viewer. So you're always thinking about how an audience is going to engage with the movie. And again, it's just, these are things that just evolved over time. But yes, I think from the first draft all the way to the movie you saw, the ending was different.
It also, just to point, like for people realizing, like it also comes down to, because if you could have made the movie that you're talking about, but it would have played to far less people, you would have had to make it on a much lower budget, and you would have been considered Lynchian rather than, you know what I mean? Like you'd be setting a path that for a completely different trajectory if you had chosen to make it the way you originally designed it.
Absolutely. And, I'm always straddling as a person, as an artist, like I have more probably fringe tastes musically, right, than most people. Like I love very experimental music, and I've always my whole life sort of leaned into sort of more left of center things, but yet I'm now, at least in this instance, I'm making a movie or making movies that are more commercial, right? So I'm always going to sort of imbue my artistic sensibilities or my more sort of out there things, but I'm doing it in a more in a more mainstream vein, right? So it's just that it's that right balance, It's also where you are. Maybe one day I will make more of a sort of like really heavy feeling, less narrative, less whatever movie. But right, with this instance, it was just that was the movie to make.
I apologize for pulling us on into a side street, but jumping back into spoilers. So was it always, and this is a big spoiler, was it always going to be Justin that was the killer?
Yeah, who orchestrated his girlfriend's death. Yeah, that was always the same. I mean, the like the tent poles of the story never changed, right? It wasn't like we changed. We like approached things from scenes certainly from different ways, but the general story was always the same.
Here's my super specific question that I teed up earlier, because I saw this on Reddit and I'm like, oh, it's kind of right. Are the colors that all of the characters wear specific to who they are and their intentions in the movie?
No, but I did see something like that. That's one of the things where I was like, wow, people really read into those things. I would say again, that's a question for my costume designer. She might be like, absolutely. And I don't want to answer that actually, because I want to let Amanda take responsibility for that, because if she were doing that, I don't remember if we had specific conversations. I know we had certain conversations in terms of like maybe color things, in terms of color stories with each character. Those conversations are a little distant in my memory, so I don't want to speak on that. But I think actually Amanda, who you should speak to, she might have a better answer to that. But yes, I did read that. And again, I was like, those are when I'm like, oh man, this is people really engage with the movie. They're going color beat by beat. That's pretty cool.
I re-scrubbed through and tried to like line everything up. I'm like, oh, this kind of makes sense. And I purposely didn't wear blue because of that post.
Well, by the way, now that you say that, I do remember Amanda and I having conversations about the color for specific characters. So I think, yeah, that was something that she was doing. But again, I don't take credit for that. That's more her. So
So one of the things about this film, just like every film, is where do you actually stop? What is those closing shots? So I'm curious, was there ever a debate on the film ending with Benicio shot on the chair? Or was it like how did you decide? Because it goes a little further with, Justin on the golf course and, Benicio in the kitchen. So how did you decide exactly where you wanted to end it? And was it possibly ever something else?
yes, so there were discussions about like, okay, so when we shot the scene with like the little kids at the window, which is kind of like, again, very aligned tonally with what we're doing with the rest of the movie, with the home renovation, with just all the stuff with the characters. Again, it's like teeter on like evil and unnerving, but also with like a warmth and a little bit of a levity that's like the film's sort of wavering between various tones. That felt like very aligned with the tone of the rest of the movie. And then you have like this, he's calling 911, right? And he's just like, she's like, 911, what's your emergency? And then you see the tone and you see that, you're on Benicio's face and it's such an incredible performance, right? With his face right there. And you could end the movie. We actually tried in the edit. We were like playing around. My editor, Kevin Hickman, shout out Kevin, he's amazing. We were like playing with it. We're like, wow, you could just cut to black here. That's pretty striking,
Yep.
But again, these are then conversations you have with your collaborators, like, okay, well, taking the audience and like, what is that going to do for the perspective of the audience? Yes, it's a striking ending, but is the audience going to feel like, well, what happened to Justin? Right? Are they going to like, what happened to, are they going to, and it felt like I do this sort of thing in the kitchen, that like is a little bit of like an epilogue that's like intercuts this thing with Justin and Benicio in the kitchen. I mean, I love the metaphor of the paraffin, of him healing, right? And then he's sort of shedding the skin as the wound. And then he, with the faucet at the end, it just felt like just worked, and it's like, again, you could end the movie with him at, looking at the kids and at that window and staying in that room. But for various reasons, we decided to do the ending that one that ended up making the cut.
I did want to ask about the touchless faucet and choosing that as your final frame, but not even just choosing that as your final image, but figuring out precisely how long that shot should be.
So it's a very quick shot. The camera's on a dolly. 99.9%. By the way, shout out Dwayne, our dolly grip, who I met, who's also Fincher's dolly grip, who did The Killer. He sat right behind me at the screening last night. Love him. These guys don't get the credit that they deserve, right? There's like these people, all those moves that you guys like, that we like, that I like. There's people operating the camera and who are responsible for just how clean and sharp and beautiful they are. And actually, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if Dwayne did that shot. I'm not sure if there was someone else. Anyway, because we had anyway, the point is because he left a few days early to do The Killer. But going back to that shot, what I like about that shot is that the camera sort of starts like with Benicio as he's walking away from Alicia, and it's like a move, and then we kind of land in our B position. And right when we land, it's like that perfect time where he does the hand thing. And if you notice it, it's like on a beat. Right on the Dylan song, it's on a beat. He doesn't finish the hand. It kind of like goes, so it's like it's kind of like, Steve, what you were saying earlier, these kind of like sharp cuts. It's like we end the movie on a cut that's very similar to what we were doing earlier in the movie, which is it's these whooshes, right? These very sharp things where you're cutting before the shot really ends. It's just stylistically and aesthetically something that I'm drawn to as a viewer, and that I like to do as a maker as well,
I'm curious, when the film is successful, like after 3 weeks, being number one, does Netflix actually call you and say, do you want to do more with Benicio's character? Or how much is it sort of like, this is a contained story, it was good, got, people like it, and let's move on to something else?
I've never had any conversations with Netflix about, opening up this story of Reptile. So, I mean, if there are conversations, no one's reached out to me about that. But, I think the film is very self-contained, and I don't know, what you would, at this moment on, whatever day this is, at whatever time. I haven't thought about, a different iteration of the story or in a different, either past or the future. So I don't know. I think everyone's just very happy that the movie has found its audience and it's finding its audience and across the globe, and that's really exciting. So I think we're just happy with just the reception that it's been getting, from people watching the movie, and it's certainly a word of mouth movie without the actors having to promote the movie. This is a movie that's really found its audience from word of mouth, and that's a great feeling that this is a movie that there wasn't this like crazy big thing. It wasn't like you had all these actors going on TV shows, and so it kind of just found its footing, and that's really exciting.
That'd be a really nice way to end the interview, but I want to squeeze in one more specific thing. I have to ask you about the not even just the Frisbee shot, but the idea of incorporating the Frisbee that way at all. What inspired that? Was that in the draft from the very beginning?
No, that was later. That came later. It was a conversation that we had, and I remember there's all these like acts of God in the movie, right? Like had Benicio not like dropped the binder, right? Like in the beginning of it's like kind of mid second act, like, and he kind of sees the bites, he might not have reopened the case. It was like this moment where it just like fell out and these two bite marks, and he puts them together, and it kind of gets his brain thinking. And there's this idea of like kids playing outside the house, which we love. This idea, like, that's me. I'm putting myself in the movie, which this is my first film. I'm just playing. And at the end of the movie, we actually had a shot, by the way, it's not included, where like the Frisbee does like the sort of 2001: A Space Odyssey thing. And it just felt like a little bit too indulgent, but the shot is, excuse my language, effing amazing. It is like one of my favorite shots. Benicio and I always we have a still of it, the Frisbee, that we text each other just because we love that shot and then the image. It's so funny and bizarre. But the reason I bring it up is that when it hits the thing, it's this act of God, right? That causes this convergence between these two characters. And at the end of the movie, you have these kids make eye contact with Benicio. And that's the moment where me as a director, I am making eye contact with my lead actor, and we have this moment of like connection, right? And it's just a way to sort of impart my own experience making the movie into the narrative. You know what I mean? And that was where that came from.
I love that thinking.
I should also say that you are on social media, so down the road, not right now, you should release that shot of the 2001 on like Instagram or Twitter. Just for the hell of it.
Maybe one day in a few years. Yeah. No, but it's a cool shot. But again, by the way, making a movie, I know we have to end, but like there are so many things that I loved that just like made on the cutting room floor. They're like great shots. They're like, oh my God, this is so cool. But they don't make it. That was one of those cool shots. But again, you don't want to make a movie that's indulgent. And I didn't want, that moment felt like, it just didn't feel appropriate to indulge the viewer. I'm always shooting things like, oh my God, that's cool. Oh my God, that's cool. Oh my God. And it's like, you can't have all these oh my gods or else it detracts away from the storytelling and becomes more about the filmmaker. You know what I mean? It becomes more about like, look at what I can do. And you want to be a little bit more, or I want to be a little bit more invisible, in terms of my hand in specific sequences,
I've actually...
All right, Steve, last call.
Well, I was just going to say that I've spoken to some directors who've talked about how it was an expensive sequence. I was convinced it was the best thing we shot in the movie. It's 8 minutes, and we had to lose it in the editing room because it just didn't work in the movie, even though the filmmaking was, everything about it was amazing. It just didn't work in the movie.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the hardest things to do as a director, is when you're like, I killed this sequence. I just this shot is everything I love about cinema, but it just doesn't fit, but it's one of the things you have to do. It's just part of the process, but yeah.
So it goes. You back pocket those ideas and you do them on the next one.
Exactly. Next time.
All right. We got to let you go, Grant. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you guys so much. This was great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
All right. Thanks for everyone out there watching this edition of Collider Dailies. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We'll see you bright and early Monday morning for a brand new episode.